It's a very short piece at the end of the paragraph from Rav Kook's introduction. Rak Anchay Kodesh Raouyim להיות Sari Kodesh. Only holy people are fit to be holy princes. And exactly what that means, of course, like almost everything that Rav Kook writes, requires work. And the first section of...
Is he going to define the difference between the two?
Well, we'll see. The first section of Rav Drukman Shiri titles, Mahi Yetsira Datit. What is, let's say, orthodox creativity? That we had in the previous section. Za'zou'i hanefesh shemitzad רגשי האהבה הטבעית. They're the tremblings of the soul that come from natural love. We said that only Anchay Kodesh are fit to, in truth, to be the Sari Kodesh, those that sing the song that is implanted in the holy soul of each person, right? That it's possible that if they are not holy people, that the tahara tivit, the natural purity that's there, can be confused and perverted, as we were talking about last time, latuma menuvela, to disgusting impurity, right? When the Rav is looking at holy people, the creations that they make are not only dealing with holy topics, right? But there's natural human love for man and woman, for friends, for all sorts of things that are not inherently religious in their nature, right? There was, Drukman says, many years ago, a conference of writers and poets, and they had a half-day discussion on Mahi Safrut Datit. What is religious literature, right? Is it only those things that deal with religious subject matters, right? That's what some of them said. Another said that Safrut Datit, religious literature, isn't dependent upon the subject matter that I'm talking about, but it depends upon what is the nature of the creator of that of the literature. A religious artist that writes from the perspective of faith, right? Everything that he talks about is a religious principle, so to speak, right? How he looks at things, right? How he examines things. All of this comes from his perspective of faith. And therefore, anything that he writes about, or paints, or sculpts, or whatever type of artist he is imbued with the values of faith that are in him. Rav Drukman writes, Homnam etzel adam hamaamin einu prat nosaf במכלול האישיות שלו. Faith for a believing person isn't just another aspect of his personality. אין היא השקפת עולם שכלית בנושא מסוים. It is not a way of looking at the world on one specific thing. אלא היא נוגעת לכל אישיותו. It touches his entire personality. מחשבותיו, ואורחות חייו, his thoughts, the way he conducts his life. האמונה היא מה שהוא עצם האישיות שלו. His faith is an intrinsic part of who he is, his personality. Not only his personality, but his essence as a person. Histakluto shel hamaamin, the perspective of the believer, מחשבותיו, רגשותיו, his thoughts, his feelings, kishron היצירה שלו, his artistic abilities, כולם נובעים מתוך האמונה הנטועה בבסיס אישיותו. All of them flow out from the faith that is implanted in the, let's say, the foundations of his personality. Mishum kach yotzer dati. Because of this, the religious artist, sofer or mesharer, it doesn't matter whether he's a writer or a poet, tzier or pisel, an artist, a painter, or a sculptor, yotzer yetzira datit. He creates, what he created is religious in nature. Amunim gam k'sha'osek b'nusim she'enan toranim b'hagdaratan. Even when he's dealing with something that we would not necessarily think of Torah in its nature. Hadavar nachon gam b'tzi'ad hashlili. The negative side of this is true. Adam she'enu mamin, a person that does not believe, einu yachol lechaber safrut kodesh. He cannot create religious literature. Lo rak hanosei kovea et ha'ofi hayitzira, ela gam demuto shel hayotzer. It's not only the subject matter that is important, right? It's also who the author is, right? And it doesn't matter whether we're talking it for good or bad or anything else. The nature of the author is important as to what we're doing. By the way, there was a famous professor at Hebrew University of Kabbalah that was thought to be the greatest Kabbalist, the greatest expert in Gershom Shalom. And he had developed this whole theory. His great theory of Kabbalah is that there was always a fight between the mystics and the halachists in Judaism. And he was often challenged, how can you teach Kabbalah when you don't believe in it? He said, you don't have to be a triangle to teach math. And this is a fight that went on forever, for a long time. And
or basically saying that if a person has this essence, it doesn't mean that it has to be, it all depends how you define religious.
That's also true.
I mean, for example, let's say a person doesn't daven 3 times a day, but it could be in essence, he's a very pure person. Would you say he's not a religious person?
You're reminding me a story from Shai Agnon. Someone once asked Shai Agnon where he was from, and he said, "I'm a Yerushalmi." He says, "What are you talking about? From your accent, I can tell you're a glitzy on it. Where are you from?" And he said, "No, that's an accident of history. A few thousand years ago, a Roman general came and he took my family and he took us from Rome, and we had to go from here to here, from there, this place to that place." He said, "But be'emes, b'makor, ani Yerushalmi." He said, "In truth, in my source, I'm a Yerushalmi." So what you're saying is true, but that to have someone that doesn't believe in it be the teacher is... And anyway, along came a Baal Tshuva of only 6 years, 22 years old, who wrote, he was also that same year appointed as the youngest principal ever of a high school in the state of Israel when he was 22. And that year he wrote a book called The 13-Petaled Rose, Ravidin Steinsaltz, and completely and totally destroyed Gershom Shalom's approach to Kabbalah. But, that's essentially what Rav Drukman is talking about. And he brings a story that in one of the major libraries in Israel, The books were, of course, ordered by subject matter. And in the section in Mahshebot, Jewish thought, Israeli thought, there is a book written by a non-Jew. He says, how can this be? Someone can write about it, but it's not Mahshebot Yisrael. It's something else entirely. When you talk about a religious perspective, it's because the faith embodies all elements of the person, and therefore everything that comes out of that person, right, is Kodesh. So too, Rav Kook is saying, Rak Anshei Kodesh Room להיות Sari Kodesh. There's a requirement that to reflect what is holy, you have to have that holiness within you. I messed up and did not change the title of section 2 here, but it should be Hitkadshut HaSofrim, the sanctity of the...
In Bet?
Yes, in Beit. Sorry. The sanctity of the authors. The Rav comes up that the idea of what's in the mind of, let us say, Israeli creation, right, is holy. We have it in many psukim. Pasuk from Shmos, V'atem tiyu li mamlechas konim v'goy kadosh. You'll be, for me, a kingdom of priests, a holy nation, right? This is supposed to be priesthood. One of the aspects of priesthood is they're supposed to be teachers, right? It's supposed to be imbued within them these ideas that they're supposed to be goy kadosh. To be able to be the kohanim, they have to be goy kadosh.
So as you don't bring up pasuk Anshei Kodesh Tiyuli.
Yes, that's also true. I didn't. If Drukman didn't bring that pasuk, can no longer ask him why he didn't. But also in Yeshayahu, 2 places in Yeshayahu. Amzu yitzarti li tilasi yisaperu. This nation I have created so that they will tell my praises. Right, meaning the nation. Yeshayahu is saying the nation of the Jewish people that was created to reflect a certain outlook of life, a religious outlook and of the world, they are the ones that should sing the praises of God. And because of this, at the beginning of Yeshayahu, Perek Beis, what? V'halchu amim rabim, many nations will go. V'amru, and they will say, L'chu v'nalei el har Hashem, let us go to the mountain of God. El beis Elokei Yaakov, to the house of the God of Jacob. V'yireinu midrachav, and let us learn from their ways. V'nelchu be'orchotav, that we should walk in their pathways. Ki mitzion.
No. It's his.
Midrachav, from his.
And his. Midrachav be'orchotav. It's
his road, his paths. Ki mitzion teitzei Torah, from Zion comes out the Torah. Udvar Hashem Yerushalayim, and the word of God from Yerushalayim. Right there, it is what faith has to give the world, is what we have learned from that faith, right? In Orot Tchiyah, Rav Kook says, Efshar l'safrut Yisraelit shetatzliach. It is impossible for Israeli literature to be successful below hiskadshut haneshamot shel hasofrim, without sanctifying the neshama of the authors, right? To create something that is holy in its nature, the person that is creating it has to have become holy in their nature, right? The author is not a tape recorder, right? He hears something, he puts it down, right? It's someone.
He's passing on his essence.
He's receiving things. He's, I would say, digesting them, right, and then creating something new that comes out of it. And all of this has to be done, whether he's a writer or a poet, right? Whether he's an artist or a sculptor, right? He is reflecting those things that came through his soul and through his personality and were affected by his religious understanding of the world, from his religious outlook, right? Everyone looks at things through their own glasses, right? If you wear a red pair of glasses, the world appears red. If you wear a blue pair of glasses, the world there appears blue. There's the in Hakevas Ashisha. Do you remember the book of? It's a book of poems that was turned into songs by for children. Very, very famous Israeli thing, and all the great Israeli singers were involved in creating the album Hakevas Ashisha. And there's one poem in there about a guy he's a green guy, and he at night he dreams green dreams, and he wakes up in his green bed, and he lights his cigarette, and it's green smoke. He gets in his green car, and he's driving through green streets, and suddenly he sees on the sidewalk a blue guy, and he says, "Hey, ish kahol, hey, blue guy, what are you doing here?" And the blue guy says, "Ani sipor acher. I'm another story." So there's this idea that however we think about things, that's the way we're going to perceive them. So a person that is sanctified is going to see the world through sanctified glasses. There's a very interesting halacha, by the way. When you're looking at a woman's blood stain to determine whether she's a nida or not, you're supposed to look at it in sunlight, not in bright light because it distorts, but in a shaded sunlight because it's a pure light. The Torah Shlamim in his commentary in Hilchos Nida says you can also use olive oil, light from an olive oil lamp. He says because olive oil is compared to the Torah, and therefore it gives a pure light. That's what he's saying. You have to look at it in the Torah way. The sun was created by God, that you can use. And it's certainly true that incandescent lights are redder than sunlight, and standard fluorescent lights are bluer than sunlight, and so on. But the idea that how we look at something depends upon the glasses that we're using to look at it is very important to us, which leads us into the third part of the shir, histaklut al metziut, how we look at reality. Each person can bring infinite numbers of example from how his personal outlook affects how they perceive different things that occur. When you talk about something in the news, right? People from different places, from different perspectives, perceive it entirely differently. I'll give one example. In the 6-Day War, Rav Unterman, in a tshuva that he wrote about the 6-Day War and whether we say a bracha on Halal, on Yom Yerushalayim, and so on, he says it was the greatest of miracles that Jordan decided to attack us so that we could recover the holy places. He says, we had no plans for it. It was by nace that Jordan believed, as if the king of Jordan didn't know that Arab leaders lie to each other. But he completely and totally believed Nasser that they were having great victories. Absolutely no confirmation of this, right? And he attacked, right? Thinking that he would share in the booty, whatever. And Abba Evan, in his history of Israel, writes that it was the greatest of disasters that Jordan decided to attack us, because now we have to deal with all of these Arabs in the occupied territory, right? The difference of looking at something depends upon the perspective that you come from. Dierkman says in one of his 2 years in high school, he was only in high school for 2 years, 9th and 10th grade, because then his family needed help with Parnassa, so he had to, it was common in the early days of the state, he had to go and help his family. So he only had 2 years in high school. He heard a father tell his son, Al tityaches b'rtzinut rabbah l'divrei harav. Don't pay so much attention to what the rabbi says. Hu makabel miskoret k'dei sheyagid kach. He receives his salary to tell you these things, right? If we forget for a minute the horrible damage, the horrible educational damage that the father has done to his son, right? It also tells us something about how the father looks at the world. Right. He only looks at the world as everything is done for the purpose of money, right? Mm-hmm. I go to work to get a salary. I do this to get money. I do that to get money. Everything surrounds that everything that he looks at in the world is, what is it worth, right? How much can I make out of it? And if you look at it that way, you certainly don't have a spiritual outlook at the world, and you're incapable of understanding those things that are spiritual in an effective way.
And how's it going to affect the child, the son?
Right? No. He said, I'm not going to pay attention to the educational damage, but he is teaching the son the only thing that matters is money. And he said there's something that's said in Israel when people get involved in a fight about something. Lama hu nevak kol kach al inyan zeh? Ma yotzei lo mizeh? Why is he fighting so much for this? What is he going to get out of it? Right? It's coming from the same perspective, meaning don't get involved in something unless you have a personal gain from it. You have to have there must be the person doesn't have an ulterior motive. He has absolutely nothing to give him, so why is he doing it? Right? It's completely and totally failing to understand, right, that there can be things, right, that are worth engaging in, even though I have nothing to get out of it. We have at the beginning of Shmuel Beis, Perek Yud. I should have said at the beginning of Perek Yud of Shmuel Beis, right? V'yach Rechen. It happened after this. V'yamoch Melech b'nei Ammon. The king of Ammon died. The king of Ammon had helped David HaMelech, and now he's passed away. V'imlo Chanon b'no tachtav. And Chanon, his son, rules in his place. V'yomer David. So David says, Esei chesed im Chanon ben Nachash. I will do a chesed to Chanon ben Nachash. Kasher asav aviv imadi. Just like his father did to me, chesed. He did a chesed for me. V'yishlach David l'nachamo biyad avadav el aviv. And he sent his servants to Chanon, right, to console him on the death of his father. V'yavo avdei David eretz b'nei Ammon, and David HaMelech's servants came to the land of Ammon. Pasuk 3. V'yamru sarei b'nei Ammon el Chanon adonehem. And the servants, the lords of B'nai Ammon, said to Hanun, their lord, Hamichbad David et avicha be'einecha. Is David really honoring your father in your eyes? Ki shalach lecha menachamim, that he sent you people to comfort you. Halo b'avor hakores ha'ir. He's come to look through the city. For l'ragel lahofcha, to spy it and to overturn it. Shalach David esav David lecha. That's why he sent you these people, right? That they, his advisors, couldn't understand the idea of why David HaMelech would want to comfort him. He must have an ulterior motive for this. There must be something going on. Only if he has something that he could get out of it, would he ever invest the effort into sending his servants here. It couldn't be that he just wants to do nichum aveiling. And one of the things we always come back to this idea that we're human beings, we have our own inclinations and so on, and we have to check why are we doing something? Are we really doing it for the right reason? Hopefully we always are, but it's good to check yourself from time to time, unless you're at tzaddik gamor. Am I doing this for the right reason, or perhaps I'm not doing it for the right reason?
So and the continuation of the story.
Yeah, well, it's not important for what I have now. I'm aware of the continuation of the Navi.
Actually, this is, and the continuation of that is why I said chazak min chazak.
Right, that's correct. Which, of course, people don't know because people don't know Navi. All right, we will continue this next week.